Hi there, I'm Miss Dawn Godlewski, an American girl who called the cornfields of Illinois home until over 10 years ago when I started navigating the chaos of life overseas. If you've ever felt that itch for something more, that whisper telling you to break free from the ordinary, you're in the right place. This podcast is your backstage pass to the wild ride of moving abroad. I'm here to pull back the curtain on the real journey, sharing stories that are funny, dramatic, and sometimes downright unbelievable. We'll explore the gritty details, from battling culture shock and navigating tricky visa processes to celebrating those small victories that make it all worth it. So whether you're daydreaming about a new life abroad or already in the thick of it, grab your passport and let's explore what it really means to live life beyond borders. Welcome to A Broadly Speaking. Hey there, friend. Welcome to the A Broadly Speaking podcast. My name is Miss Dell. If you're new here, welcome. If you've been around a while, welcome back. I'm super excited. This is our last episode of 4 on your budget for moving abroad. I hope that you joined our 3-day Don't Go Broke Abroad challenge. If you haven't registered and you still want to, you can catch the replays. The link is in the show notes for you. I just really am excited about this. I think it's a great opportunity for everybody. The replays are only available until the 15th of April, tax day. Yay. But I want to make sure that you get a chance to watch those. If you're listening to this after the 1st or 15th of April, well, I will host it again, I am sure. But I just wanted to share that with you. This week's episode for me is super important because I think it's a timely episode. I want to dive into the topic of how much do you really need to live abroad? You've probably seen all the posts, heard the horror stories, and maybe even started mentally preparing yourself for the idea that moving abroad is going to cost you an arm and a leg and a kidney and your firstborn child and, right? But what if I told you it's not really as expensive as you think? Spoiler, you don't need a yacht or a 10-year supply of fancy lattes to live comfortably abroad. Let's dive in and talk about the reality of budgeting for life overseas because I'm here to tell you there are plenty of ways to make it work on a reasonable budget. First things first, let's talk about the cost of living in the country you're moving to. Here's the kicker. Just because you're moving abroad doesn't mean you're going to pay more or some insane premium for day-to-day life. Sure, there are a few exceptions. Hello, welcome to Switzerland and Norway and, well, the UAE. But in most cases, the cost of living in countries outside the US can actually be way, way cheaper. So how can you know for sure? Let's talk about a few things you need to think about when it comes to your living expenses. First is your housing costs. We all know that rent can eat up a huge portion of your budget, but here's the thing. You can absolutely live well without shelling out $3,000 a month for a shoebox apartment in a major city like New York or LA. You don't have to live in a studio. Trust me. Places like Portugal, Spain, or even parts of Eastern Europe, you can get amazing properties for only $1,200 a month. And if you're thinking, okay, but what about the luxurious designer living situation? Sorry, my friend, that's not what we're focusing on here. If you're planning on a more modest lifestyle, you can expect to spend probably about, 75% or so of what you've been spending in the US. What I will say, though, that requires you to live like a local. Go for a nice centrally located apartment in a smaller town or city. So it'll cost you half of what you pay in a large metropolitan area, and absolutely avoid the expat-friendly apartments that you'll see advertised online. You absolutely want to look for apartments that are realistically within your budget. And what you can do to start looking at, oh my gosh, how much is rent going to be? Pick a few cities around where you want to move. So say you're picking Barcelona. Look in Barcelona, then also look on maps and see what is around Barcelona that may be interesting for you that's accessible by public transport, for example, and look at apartment costs out there. You can also, if you want, there are usually local websites for rentals. For example, here in Switzerland, there's Comparis, there's a bunch of them, but I'll use Comparis as a good example. I can put in, for example, the city I want to live in. I can also put in the area in which I want to live in with a radius of, let's say, 5 or 10 kilometers. And then I can look based on that, on Google Maps, if there's public transportation available, is it reasonable for me to get within, a reasonable distance of either where I'm going to work or grocery stores or whatever's super important to me to look for. I highly recommend taking a look at that if you're living, for example, in a premium area. When we moved to Basel, in Switzerland, we lived walking distance to my husband's work. And that came at a premium because a lot of people wanted to live within that small area. He was working for a large company at the time. And so when we lived close, it gave us a premium. If we would have lived farther away and had to take the public transportation instead of walking to work every day, it would have saved us a bit of money. That being said, it was worth it for us. We loved our apartment. I do not regret paying what we paid, but we got less apartment for the same amount of money because of that, right? So look for, if you're trying to maximize space and maximize your budget that you have to spend, look for something that maybe isn't right next to a big company office or right in the center of downtown or right like a stop on the public transportation tram line, for example. Maybe consider like walking slightly farther or having a slightly more outside the city living area, and that can reduce your costs substantially. Where we live now in central Switzerland, and the city that is closest to us, it's about 15 minutes away by car. It's 20 kilometers. If we were in the center of the city, that would cost us about 4,000 a month in rent or so for a nice 3-bedroom apartment. Whereas where we live outside of the city, people are paying about 3,000 a month. So they're saving almost 1,000 a month in costs associated with routine living. And they get more space out here than they would inside the city because there's more space inherently. So just consider that as you're making your move. Next up is healthcare costs. In many countries, healthcare isn't just affordable, it's actually good. And that's the part where you might get a little uncomfortable if you're used to the US system. I'm not saying that the US doesn't have great healthcare. Please don't take that way. We just make it way harder to access for way too many people. But when you move abroad and you're calculating your cost of living, you'll find that a lot of countries have excellent public healthcare systems that cost a fraction of what you pay for insurance premiums in the US. For instance, in countries like Germany, France, and Canada, you'll pay less for quality healthcare, even with private insurance. I'm talking healthcare that doesn't bankrupt you every time you need a prescription or a checkup. When we lived in Austria, I had to have surgery. I was in the hospital for 7 days. I came out of the hospital with a hospital bill of exactly $0. When I had my daughter here in Switzerland, I was in the hospital for 4 days. From the day that I found out that I was pregnant until 4 days after I got out of the hospital, I paid $1.50, which was for a bottle of soda. And in fact, the hospital ended up writing it off. So healthcare costs are really, really affordable. For perspective, here in Switzerland, we do not have universal healthcare or socialized medicine. We do have to pay monthly insurance. We pay for a family of 3, we pay about $800 a month for all 3 of us together for insurance. You could pay more. We have a deductible, so you could pay more, or you could pay less per month if you wanted to have a less deductible situation. It's just how we choose to do it. But for example, I have never, well, that's not true. I have one time met my $2,500 deductible for the year. And I have 2 MRIs a year and an ultrasound every year for my cancer screenings. So it's absolutely possible to save a bundle from what you're paying in the US on your cost of living for medical care, as well as considering that if you're laid off your job or if something happens, you're not going to suddenly not have insurance or have to pay exorbitant COBRA fees to cover you. So those are all things when you're looking at the cost of living that you can look into as well. Next up, let's talk about food. The thing that keeps you alive, but also seems to drain your bank account, especially if you have teenagers. If you're used to running to Whole Foods in the US, let me hit you with a reality check. Grocery shopping abroad does not need to break your budget. Yes, eating out in some tourist hotspots are going to be pricey, for example, in Paris, but buying fresh local produce and cooking at home can save you a ton of money. In fact, grocery shopping in places like Portugal, Mexico, Thailand are absolutely dirt cheap. And it's actually cheaper to buy fresh ingredients like vegetables and fresh fruits than it is in the US where prepackaged things are the norm. You can live like a king with fresh ingredients and meals for just a fraction of what you pay in the US when you talk about grocery shopping in other countries. Here in Switzerland, I won't say that it's cheaper, but I will say that, for example, when we're talking about the cost of fruits and vegetables, I pay less for fruits and vegetables here in Switzerland than I ever did in the United States. I went to visit my parents last year in July, and I was shocked at the exorbitant prices of green apples. When I pay the equivalent of 150 for a pound, my parents were paying more than $2 for a pound. And they live outside, they don't live in a big city. So, okay, let's talk egg prices, which right now it's timely when I'm recording this in April of 2025, or I'm sorry, in March of 2025, it's timely to talk about egg prices. I get free range bio organic blah 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 eggs from the local farm for, I think it's four and a half, or I'm sorry, $5.50 a dozen, where my parents are paying $8 or $9 a dozen right now where they live for just regular eggs, right? So it absolutely can be cheaper grocery wise, and not only cheaper, substantially cheaper grocery wise for you when you make the move abroad. So just as a consideration as well. If you're talking about transportation, and I apologize if there's background noise, they're doing some work outside. Welcome to life abroad. If you don't hear it, that's okay too, but just in case. Transportation is cheaper practically everywhere abroad. Sure, if you're in a huge city like New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, public transportation might not be ideal. But let me tell you, once you're abroad, you'll have great options galore that don't involve expensive taxis or consistently getting stuck in traffic. Take public transportation, rent a bike or a scooter. It's way cheaper than an Uber and honestly way more fun, and you actually get a bit of a workout in the process. Many cities abroad have super efficient, cheap, and eco-friendly transportation systems. If you're living in a country like the Netherlands or Japan, you can get ready to spend just pennies on a bus ride. When we were living in Austria, we were able to pay literally $1 a day, or the equivalent of $1 a day, for our tram pass, our public transportation pass. And that got us all throughout Europe, or I'm sorry, not true, all throughout Vienna on on one ticket that we paid for once a year. It was $365 for the year. It was amazing. And we didn't need to have car. We didn't have to pay for parking. We didn't have to do all that kind of stuff. Now, we chose to have a car when we lived in Austria. When we lived in Basel, for example, we did not have a car. We lived without one for all 4 years of our life in Basel. And it relied exclusively on public transportation. It was a great way for us to save a lot of money. We didn't have to pay for parking. We didn't have to pay for gas. We didn't have to pay for insurance, etc. And it really did support us as well as working in the environment, right? So there's great ways to do a lot of things that you can choose what is right for you. Another big budget winner is lifestyle adjustments. This is the part where the magic happens. Are you willing to let go of some of the habits that currently drain your bank account? Instead of spending $6 on a fancy coffee every day, because it's not going to necessarily be convenient to stop, you might get into the habit of making your own coffee at home. Or maybe you'll swap a few of your online shopping habits for trips to the local market to buy clothes and goods that are way more affordable. Trust me, those small changes can add up. Here in Switzerland, we don't have Amazon. So I can't just Amazon Prime something when I need it. And that also saves a bundle on all of the bundles that I pay for, right? So I don't have a subscription to Amazon Prime anymore. We have subscriptions, for example, to Netflix and Disney, but we don't pay for local cable because we have subscriptions to Netflix and Disney. It saves us money that way as well. So it's all on balance as you go through. And the best part of all of this is you're not going to be missing out on anything. You'll still be enjoying life, experiencing the culture, and having fun. You won't just be drowning in unnecessary expenses. Consider, for example, what you pay for today. If you're paying for Netflix, Hulu, I don't know, Amazon Prime, Disney, and cable, how much money are you spending on your cost of living versus if you move abroad and you decide, you know what, I mainly only watch Disney and Netflix, so that's what I'm going to maintain. That's absolutely up to you, but it does there are ways to save, let's say, and make your cost of living way cheaper. My cell phone bill here in Europe is a lot less than what I was paying in the US. In fact, I'm paying for 2 phones and my home internet less than I was paying for 1 phone in the US. So it is possible for you to consider all the different ways when you're comparing apples to apples on what the cost. I do have, and I will link in the show notes, a free budget calculator that can help you find out what the cost of living is in each country. That's going to tell you what you'll need for your first few months abroad, and you can divide that by 3 essentially to kind of give you an idea of how much it is to make that move. But I'll drop that in the show notes for you in case you're interested. And there's a bunch of different countries to your list, but it gives you kind of an idea of what it will cost to make the move and what you need to make the budget work for you. So let's wrap this up. The truth is, living abroad does not require you to have some massive budget. It's all about smart planning, adjusting your lifestyle, and choosing a country with a lower cost of living than the US or wherever you're currently living. You don't need to be wealthy to move abroad and to also continue to live well. You need to be resourceful and make decisions that prioritize the life that you want to live. If you're looking to make the move abroad and you're looking for how in the world do I even budget for this, that is where our 3-day Don't Go Broke Abroad challenge comes into play. Again, it started April 1st. If you weren't able to catch it live, there is a replay available until the 15th. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at I am Estelle on Instagram, or you can email me. I am more than happy to chat with you about how to make the budget work for you wherever you are. If you have any other topics too that you want me to do a series on, or you have a question about, drop that to me as well. I know this last 3 weeks or 4 weeks we've been talking about your budget, but if there's something else that you're super, super interested in, feel free to let me know, and I will try and do one of those as well. All right, my friend, that's it on this one. I will see you on the next one. Thanks for tuning in to A Broadly Speaking. If today's episode got you dreaming a little bigger or thinking a little braver, go ahead and hit subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who's ready for their own adventure. And hey, don't be a stranger. Come hang out with me over on Instagram at I am Estelle for the real, unfiltered life abroad. Keep that passport handy, and remember, life's too short to stay in one place.